7 years after the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant disaster, scientists are getting a more complete understanding of its timeline and impact. They're making detailed calculations of when and how much radioactive substances were released. This analysis tracks the changes in emission levels. Scientists say on March 12th, a hydrogen explosion in the building housing Reactor 1 caused an initial spike. Another hydrogen explosion on March 14th in the Reactor 3 building triggered a second spike. And emissions recorded on March 15th are thought to have come from Reactors 2 and 3. Then, starting on March 18th, emissions increased again, even though no exceptional events were recorded. Observational data from that time is scarce. This has limited the accuracy of analyses up to now. But in March, a new set of data emerged, helping researchers get a better grasp of what happened.
3つのまた大きな放射性物質を持ったプルームがやってきている。
This data confirm emissions of highly radioactive substances comparable to that from a hydrogen explosion. They began on March 18th and occurred on 3 different days. Radioactive contamination spread as far north as Iwate Prefecture and to the southern Kanto region, including Tokyo. The latest analysis suggests that radioactive emissions occurring over 4 days accounted for 40% of the total. The day before the increase began, Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, significantly reduced the supply of water to cool the reactors. For 2 days, the reactors were cooled insufficiently. It's possible that may have caused the resurgence in emissions. We set out to find out why TEPCO cut back on water for cooling. We also wanted to know why TEPCO overlooked deteriorating conditions inside the reactors for 2 days. Together with experts, we examined records of comments made by officials from TEPCO and the Japanese government during the crisis. We used artificial intelligence to analyze logs of more than 30,000 teleconferences among those on the front lines. What we uncovered include an emergency manual that failed to provide a means for dealing with the accident as it developed, and an organizational failure that allowed worsening problems to go undetected. We recreated the crisis response in detail, based on accounts of more than 500 people who were involved and teleconference logs.
そういう手順書をちゃんとさ、本店の方で作っといてほしいのよ。真剣にそういうものを作っといてくれよ。328だ。
What must we do to ensure that this kind of disaster is never repeated? We focus in on 2 days of chaos in responding to the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear accident. Entry is still restricted to the town of Futaba in Fukushima Prefecture. 7 years after the disaster, researchers announced a new data set pointing to large-scale emissions. They began on March 18, 2011, a week after the initial accident. We went to an area 3 kilometers northwest of the nuclear plant. This air monitoring station is the closest one to Fukushima Daiichi.
SPM こちらが大気浮遊粒子状物質 SPM を測る SPM 計になります。
The device captures and measures suspended particulate matter, or SPM, of up to 1/100th of a millimeter in size. Filter samples dating from the accident were discovered during repair work. They turned out to have captured radioactive particulates. Researchers now had an important tool for examining the concentrated radioactive emissions that started on March 18th. Of all the filters of this kind installed around eastern Japan, the newly discovered ones were the closest to Fukushima Daiichi, so they're likely to provide more accurate data about the emissions. A group of researchers at Tokyo Metropolitan University analyzed the samples. Yasuji Oda has been analyzing filters in use at the time of the Fukushima accident for 6 years. The filters were collected from around eastern Japan. Using samples from the filters, researchers can determine how the atmospheric concentration of radioactive cesium shifted by the hour. Take this sample from 2 p.m. on March 12, 2011. A dosimeter picks up no major abnormalities. But when the dosimeter reads a sample from 1 hour later, the reading jumps significantly.
Atmospheric radiation surges once a plume containing radioactive substances approaches the monitoring post. Then it returns to the previous concentration once the plume has passed.
Oda analyzed all of the filters from the Futaba monitoring post in use over 2 weeks after the onset of the nuclear disaster.
The level at Futaba was at its highest on March 12th. The second highest was on the 20th, followed by the 18th, and next is the 19th.
This chart shows fluctuations in the level of atmospheric cesium. Researchers believe the spike on March 12th was caused by emissions from reactor 1. They attribute a jump on the 15th to emissions from reactor 2 and 3. Comparably high levels of cesium were also captured on 3 occasions from March 18th to the 20th.
We're measuring air filters from different monitoring posts. By analyzing the results, we'll know when, where, and how those radioactive plumes drifted.
The air filters confirmed that massive amounts of radioactive substances were released starting on March 18th. In fact, a day earlier, the crisis took a turn for the worse when TEPCO significantly cut back on the supply of water for cooling the reactors. We looked at the events leading up to this decision. We studied how TEPCO and the Japanese government responded to the disaster. The trouble began in reactor 3 after the building housing it was destroyed by a hydrogen explosion. Nuclear fuel will continue to generate heat even after there's a meltdown. Cooling water must be continuously injected, or radioactive substances could be released. Fire engines were on site, pumping water to cool down the nuclear fuel. Water from the fire engines went into the reactor through pipes. At the time, that was the only available means of cooling. The latest analysis by Samson, an accident analysis software, found that the temperature of reactor 3 had declined thanks to water from the fire engines. At the on-site emergency response center, about 200 workers, led by plant manager Masao Yoshida, were responding to the crisis.
朝昼兼用の食事の準備ができました。一人クラッカー1個まで、それと缶詰を1個。おのおの取りに行ってください。
本店さん、ここの現地本部も6日間徹夜の人間だけでやっておりますので、ぜひとも本店の人的な支援をお願いしたいと思います。
At TEPCO's headquarters in Tokyo, a joint task force had been set up on March 15th. The members included top TEPCO executives and government officials. Banri Kaeda, then the Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry, spearheaded the joint team. Multiple organizations such as the Self-Defense Forces and fire authorities also took part in the unprecedented national effort.
皆様、本当に連日ご苦労様にございます。状況は大変厳しい状況ではございますが、皆様方のご努力、そして警視庁、自衛隊、私どもの全力を挙げてこの困難に立ち向かい、必ずこれを克服しなければならないと思っています。
On the morning of March 17th, the situation suddenly deteriorated.
3号サブちゃん、圧力変動。30分で20キロから420キロパスカルに急上昇。420。ちょっと見せて。よいしょ。3号サブちゃん圧力ハンチングしてます。
ちょっと本店さんすみません。異常が出ましたんで至急連絡をさせていただきます。サプレッションチェンバーの圧力がですね、急激に増加に転じておりますので、何らかの異常な状態が格納容器の中で起こっているのではないかというふうに想定されます。
The staff on site were on high alert. The containment vessel holding radioactive material could break apart. Pressure inside what's called the suppression chamber jumped 20-fold amid wild fluctuations. If left alone, the containment vessel could fail under pressure. At TEPCO's Tokyo headquarters, the safety team was in charge of coming up with countermeasures. The members were engineers who specialize in accident analysis.
Now, 今の必要な注水量はこれです。
現在の放火熱は10トンパーアワー程度。消防車からの注水量はそれより多めになっています。
ちょっと入りすぎてるな。いいですか。1F3 号機、他の号機に比べてだいぶ注水が多くなっていて、これを絞っていくという方向が必要だというふうに思っております。
In response to the judgment from TEPCO's headquarters, engineers at Fukushima Daiichi cut the water supply by about 3/4.
流量160リットルパーミニッツ。密閉か。了解。
They also reviewed the flow rates of water cooling reactors 1 and 2. They decided to reduce the water supply at all 3 reactors. A post-accident analysis concluded that reactor 3 became undercooled and started to heat up. Working with nuclear reactor experts, we examined the decision to reduce the supply of cooling water. A major issue came to light regarding the plant's accident preparedness. The experts focused on a manual in use at the time of the disaster. It described procedures for managing crises, but the experts said it was inapplicable to the events of March 2011. The TEPCO manual runs over 2,000 pages and lays out how workers should respond to accidents at Reactor 3. It caps the injection of water from outside sources at 2,300 cubic meters. This is to protect the containment vessel. The fire engines had already injected more than that amount. At the time, TEPCO officials assumed some of the water being pumped into the reactor was flowing into the suppression chamber. They feared that if the chamber became full and the level continued to rise, pressure would rise inside the containment vessel, and that could have destroyed the structure. That's why TEPCO scaled back the injection of water. In other words, the manual at use at the time did not allow for both cooling the reactor by water from fire engines and also protecting the containment vessel.
In a nutshell, it's a choice between the 2 options. Increasing the flow rate could fill up the suppression chamber, but to cool down the heated debris, the rate must be increased.
Concerns about the suppression chamber overruled.
The possibility of insufficient cooling wasn't something they thought about.
TEPCO officials decided to reduce the amount of water being pumped in to cool the damaged reactors. Experts have been looking at how that contributed to the series of major radioactive emissions that began on March 18th. This shows the temperature of Reactor 3 based on the latest analysis. The temperature had fallen to 200 degrees Celsius, but after the reduction in cooling water, it rose to nearly 400 degrees. Together with experts on the properties of radioactive materials, we examined changes caused by rising temperatures inside the containment vessel. The experts pointed out that a rise in temperature would lead to an increase in emissions of radioactive substances.
An increase in temperature at the wall of the containment vessel could result in partial detachment of fission products, loosely adhered to the surface. That phenomenon is possible.
As the temperature goes up, the wall dries. This frees up cesium and other radioactive particles in the gas.
Here's a visualization of the experts' theory. When the nuclear fuel melted down, some of the airborne radioactive cesium filling the vessel adhered to surrounding surfaces, along with moisture. When the amount of water for cooling was cut back, the temperature started to rise. Then the water on the wall evaporated, setting the cesium free and allowing it to spread inside the vessel. What's more, the rising temperature caused vapor and other gases to expand, increasing the pressure. The cesium then leaked out along with vapor and other materials. This is footage of Reactor 3 taken at the time of the events described. It shows a massive amount of steam suspected to be leaking from the containment vessel. Experts believe that cutting the supply of water to cool the reactors led directly to the spikes in radioactive emissions that began March 18th.
Quantifying the emissions will require further work. We'll have to do experiments or carry out simulations to get to the bottom.
The Atomic Energy Society will follow up on this issue.
Experts also zeroed in on white smoke rising from the Reactor 2 building at the time. They said the presence of smoke suggests emissions from this and other reactors should also be examined. We asked TEPCO about the link between the reduction in cooling water and increased emissions of radioactive substances. TEPCO replied that it's difficult to identify a causal relationship. Conditions deteriorated in Reactor 3 after the supply of water was cut. TEPCO officials were unaware of the crisis developing inside the reactor for 2 days. How did this happen? To answer that question, we examined the course of events chronologically based on teleconference logs. They show that TEPCO had a chance to prevent the situation from deteriorating right after the water supply was reduced. Tadayuki Yokomura was the manager of Kashiwazaki-Kariwa nuclear power plant in central Niigata Prefecture. He made this comment during a teleconference.
ドライウェルの中が満水状態に近づいているなんていうのは夢の夢物語。すべて蒸発しているというふうに見るべきです。ですから今の注水した量がすべてドライウェルの中に溜まっているというふうに想定して水位を絞ることには反対です。
Yokomura worried that the cooling water from fire engines was flowing somewhere else, leaving the reactor with an insufficient amount of water.
ご懸念は分かりました。安全側の方と検討して万全を期したいと思います。
Yoshida, the plant manager at Fukushima Daiichi, was in charge of the crisis response. But at this time, he was overwhelmed trying to ensure the workers' safety.
おい、大丈夫か？大したのか？まだ4名戻ってきてないんだよな。まだです。まだ戻ってきてません。
Let's take a closer look at what was said during the teleconferences. Yokomura at the nuclear plant in Niigata expressed concerns about cooling the reactor.
ドライウェルの中が満水状態に近づいているなんていうのは夢の夢物語。水位を絞ることには反対です。
ご懸念は分かりました。安全側の方と検討をして、万全を期したいと思います。
はい、よろしくお願いします。
大丈夫か？退避したのか？もう20分だぞ。
Yoshida didn't join the discussions on cooling the reactors. What's more, he and other officials on site at Fukushima Daiichi didn't raise any objections to curbing the amount of water sent into the reactors. Risk management experts say the conversations expose an organizational problem. Risks were missed whenever Yoshida was not involved.
Judging from the teleconference clip, Yoshida was the only decision maker.
Many of the clear-cut comments came from Yoshida. The others' remarks were ambiguous.
Things may have gone differently if people around him had supported him.
In fact, Yoshida was struggling to find a way to cool spent fuel pools outside the containment vessels. More than 3,100 nuclear fuel rods were being stored at reactors 1 through 4. Getting water to them was also vital. Yoshida worried that the operation would put workers in grave danger.
万が一燃料の頭が一部出てると、そこに冷たい水が来ると当然破裂する可能性があります。
ほんでさ、そういう手順書をちゃんとさ、本店の方で作っといてほしいのよ。
はい、了解しました。
ないのそういうもの。そういうものなしにさ、ただ水入れりゃいいと思ったのかよ。周りで我々見てんだぜ。けどお前、爆発したらまた死んじゃうんだぜ。やるけどさ、これ今やらないといけないことは分かるけどさ、だったらもっと真剣にそういうものを作っといてくれよ。
I kept telling them till the moment I left the on-site emergency response center that workers' safety should be the top priority. Those workers would be the first to be killed if something went wrong.
We analyzed 34,000 conversations exchanged during the crisis. They provide further evidence that Yoshida was overwhelmed with preparations for getting water into the fuel pools. Using artificial intelligence trained to analyze speech and writing, we classified Yoshida's comments by topic. The larger the circle, the more comments were made about the topic. A decision was made on March 17th to cut the amount of water pumped into the reactors. On that day, Yoshida made only 6 comments about cooling the reactors. By far, the majority of his conversations were about getting water into the fuel pools. They totaled 242. Further analysis illustrates that when more people were involved, the easier it became to overlook the risks. This shows discussions between Yoshida and others on the spent fuel pools. In just one day, he spoke to more than 30 individuals and organizations, including politicians and self-defense force officials. The time spent coordinating among different parties is called the coordination cost. Experts warn that it hampers smooth decision-making.
It seems a lot of time was spent on coordination. When someone who knew nothing about the procedure joined the talks, the others had to explain everything that had taken place already. It must have taken time, and it probably contributed to the confusion at the plant. Amid all this, it slipped their minds that their top priority should be to bring the situation under control and minimize the damage.
The decision to release water into the fuel pools created the need for additional coordination. The number of conversations about the evacuation of workers and directing vehicles for the operation increased. While looking after these new issues, Yoshida's remarks on the cooling of the reactors decreased significantly.
Now J ビレッジにはハイパーレスキューの皆さん着きましたか？中に入っていただいて休憩を取ってもらってください。よろしいですね？はい。
As Yoshida and his team worked on preparations to get water into the fuel pools, they had to deal with all kinds of other demands.
消防庁の方からですね、現地の図面を欲しいと。
官邸さんの方からはですね、夜間作業の際、照明とそれから電源は十分なのかと。
消防庁ハイパーレスキュー隊の件、100ミリシーベルトまで測れる計測器を30台用意してほしいというのがご意向で。
A national effort was underway to bring the unprecedented disaster at Fukushima Daiichi under control. But this effort caused an inflated coordination cost and left the growing crisis undetected. Organizations within the national government were supposed to lead the disaster response. But records show that officials failed to realize the situation was growing worse. More than 20,000 faxes were exchanged between organizations including TEPCO, the Nuclear and Industrial Safety Agency, and the Nuclear Safety Commission. We analyzed the contents and times they were sent and received. We found 2 handwritten messages notifying recipients that the amount of water sent into the reactors had been cut. Banri Kaeda, Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry at the time, was in charge of the Joint Task Force. He says that the government knew about TEPCO's decision to scale back on water, but didn't raise any objections.
The government received little information about what was going on inside the reactors. It was the government's responsibility, but we didn't think about opposing TEPCO's decision at the time. Looking back, I have to admit, the Nuclear and Industrial Safety Agency should have pointed out the graveness of the decision.
The Fukushima Daiichi continued to release large volumes of radioactive substances as the crisis continued, unnoticed. A close examination of data on Reactor 3 reveals TEPCO's failure to take a measurement that was critical to grasping conditions inside. The main control room served as the front line of the disaster response. It's situated about 500 meters from the building housing the on-site emergency response center. The control room had lost all power. Workers used batteries to restore gauges so they could find out about the state of the reactor. Their top priority was restoring the water gauge. The amount of power available was limited, so restoring the thermometers for monitoring temperatures inside the reactors was postponed. We set out to understand why water levels took precedence over temperatures. We spoke to one of the plant's former operators. He helped compile an emergency response manual at TEPCO.
In a time of emergency like this, water levels are deemed to be most crucial. Temperature changes are closely monitored, but they are used for reference. Temperatures are not considered important.
Normally, water levels make it possible to grasp whether a reactor is sufficiently cooled. But due to the disaster, the water gauge was not functioning properly. The situation would have been different if power had been restored to the reactor building. With power, workers would have been able to read the thermometer and realize the reactor was in a critical state. But work to restore the power supply was put on hold for 2 days. Banri Kaeda, the government minister who was in charge of the Joint Task Force, left notes about how tasks were prioritized.
The top priority was getting water into the Reactor 3 fuel pool. Next, getting water into the Reactor 4 pool. And the third was a connection to an outside power source. Spent fuel had been exposed in the pools. We thought that if they exploded, all of eastern Japan could suffer tremendous damage.
It was impossible to simultaneously get water into the fuel pools and restore the power. Therefore, workers had no information about the temperature inside the reactor. Some of the tasks needed to restore power took place near the reactor building. If radioactive substances had been released during the operation, the workers would be in danger. Getting water into the fuel pools was most important. Restoring power was pushed further and further toward the back burner.
ちょっと至急だから至急至急。
できれば夜になる前に放水作業を行いたいと考えます。
官邸に連絡します。自衛隊が早くやりたいと言ってるから承知いたしました。作業の全体的な手順につきまして、状況の大きな変化があり、警察による放水の後、自衛隊による放水をその後連続して、したがって電源工事の方はその後ということになります。
The Joint Task Force leaders prioritized the various operations in this order. Delaying the restoration of power robbed them of the chance to discover the growing crisis inside the reactors. A TEPCO employee agreed to talk to us on condition of anonymity about the confusion at Fukushima Daiichi.
There was a gap between what the people at the plant wanted to do and what the headquarters in Tokyo ordered them to do. Even if workers had begun preparations, they were put on hold because of a change in priorities. The workers were told, for example, to review the process or remove all the equipment to clear the way for firefighting units.
Workers took part in various operations near the reactor buildings, including spraying water into the fuel pools. Their exposure to radiation continued to rise. This only added to the challenges facing everyone involved in trying to contain the disaster. When work to restore power was about to start,
本店さん、みんなこの8日間ずっと徹夜してます。それから現場行きまくってます。被曝量がですね、すでに200近く、もしくは200をオーバーしていると、そういう部下しかおりません。そういう部下にですよ、現場に行って光線量のところを決戦してこいということは私は言えませんよ。線量的にもこれ以上浴びせられないんです。そこを本当に本店さんどう思ってるのか。
Power was restored to the main control room on the morning of March 19th, 2 days after water to cool the reactors was reduced. The task force members finally realized the true depth of the crisis. They issued orders to increase the volume of cooling water. The grave consequences of not sufficiently cooling the reactors were now painfully clear. Banri Kaeda was in charge of the Joint Task Force and oversaw the disaster response along with TEPCO.
Looking back, I think we should have done this, we should have done that, about many things. We have to learn from our experiences. Of course, there should never be a nuclear accident like this ever again. We must conduct drills under certain types of conditions and take preemptive measures to prepare for the unexpected.
Massive amounts of radioactive substances were released from Fukushima Daiichi beginning on March 18, 2011. Using newly obtained air pollution observation data, researchers are trying to understand just how the contamination spread across a wide area. This is what the latest analysis of surface contamination shows. Until March 17th, contamination from radioactive substances mainly affected areas from Fukushima to southern Iwate prefectures and the northern Kanto region. But after March 18th, contamination in Miyagi and Iwate prefectures increased. It then spread to Tokyo, Yamanashi prefecture, and as far as eastern Shizuoka prefecture. Tokyo's tap water was found to contain radioactive substances in excess of the government standards. Experts believe the emissions from Fukushima Daiichi were to blame.
We believe water in Tokyo was contaminated on March 21st.
And in one corner of a waste disposal site on reclaimed land in Tokyo Bay, waste from Tokyo that was contaminated with radioactive substances from Fukushima Daiichi is being stored under protective sheeting. In all, it comes to 980 tons. Close monitoring has kept it from leaking, but authorities still haven't made a decision on final disposal. Radioactive waste from the nuclear accident remains in northeastern Japan and the region around Tokyo. Seven years on, new data are bringing additional facts about the Fukushima Daiichi disaster to light. But there's still more evidence waiting to be discovered.